You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
On today's show, we are so pleased to welcome the president of the Rochester Automobile Dealers Association, Brad McAreavy. So thank you so much, Brad, for joining us on the show today.
Pleasure to be here, Jim.
Sure. So talk to us about business in Rochester, New York. How are the auto dealers performing there? I'm sure your members are strapped for inventory like many other dealers around the country.
Yeah, absolutely true. The beginning of 2021 was actually pretty good, and so things have gotten off to a rough start this year.
Okay.
Right now, in the back half of the year, things have pretty well flattened out in comparison to a year ago. So we're running on the year about 20% down from where we were a year ago. But our current months, August and September, we're running pretty flat compared to a year ago. So I don't see us catching up by the end of the year. So that's probably about where we're going to be, down 20%.
Sure. Do some of the headwinds that we see out there in the economy and the news that we're getting, Bloomberg out of your state right there, New York, has said that, you know, it's 100% chance that we're going to be heading into a recession. Is that a concern of your members?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you hear news like that, it's a concern. I think obviously we all look around and see what's going on economically. The auto industry, I think, is very sensitive to interest rates, particularly at the retail level.
Sure.
Dealer inventories, although the inventory levels are down quite a bit, if dealers were at normal inventory levels, interest rates, which are tied to floor plan financing, is a big expense to auto dealers. And then you have the consumer side of it, which makes the affordability factor for consumers a bit more of a challenge. So yeah, I think we're concerned about it, and I don't think we're going to be able to avoid some type of economic downturn. It's a matter of how much and how quickly and how long it lasts.
Sure. As you mentioned earlier, you know, the auto industry just continues to crank along there and is not as affected by some of these things. But you know, with regard to interest rates and such, while it is a factor, you know, the analysts out there say there's such a demand, a pent-up demand for new vehicles, that even with a little bit of a downturn in the economy, the dealers are still going to be, you know, selling cars.
Yeah, look, I think there's some number of consumers out there that are in the market because they have to be.
Right.
They're either driving a vehicle that has reached its final days, or the car's gotten in an accident, or there's some aspect of their current situation that necessitates them to go out and buy a vehicle. Then there's the consumers, I think, that where it's more of a choice. They would like to go out and buy a vehicle, but the current conditions of the market may be inhibiting their ability to do that.
Right.
I think our concern is a little bit more for those people that have a choice. You know, we've gone through a period of time here where the supply side of things has been very low. Consumers have been out there looking. They're maybe not finding what they want. Some consumers are choosing to order their vehicle. But there reaches a point, I think, where some consumers just kind of take a step back and they decide they're just going to wait a little bit longer, maybe wait for the inventory levels to restore themselves to some degree. And so I think that pulls a little bit away from that demand. I think it's still there, but the conditions of the market need to change in order to bring that consumer back.
Right. Do you find it interesting that consumers are suddenly, okay with coming into a car dealership and ordering a car and waiting a few weeks? I mean, we, as you know, in the industry for so long, we spot delivered everything that we could. We had a 3-month supply of vehicles. The consumers would spend all day in the dealership negotiating that price down as low as they can. And now it seems they walk in and say, oh, it's a month to get the car, no problem, and I'll pay sticker price. Some cases more than sticker price. It is a new ball game out there, right?
Well, there's no question. I mean, I've been in the auto industry in some facet or another for over 40 years, and I've never seen it like this. I mean, we've had different times where there's been strikes in the industry that have been disruptive to certain manufacturers, but I've never seen it across the board. And I think, to your point, the reason why consumers are willing to accept that method of buying a car is because there's no other choice. There's no other manufacturer out there that probably has a full supply of vehicles that they can offer to them. And so you ordering a vehicle is again probably your only option, because everybody's in the same circumstance.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, your state has adopted California's guidelines and said, after 2035, there's not going to be any new vehicles that will be sold that will be ICE vehicles. Everything's got to be EV moving forward after 2035. What's your take on that? Are your dealers ready for that? Do you think the consumers are there? I know it's a very loaded question, but what say you on that?
Yeah, New York has been on the CalZEV program since 2005. This is not something new for us. We've been dealing with that particular set of guidelines for quite some time now. Earlier in this legislative session, New York actually passed a piece of legislation that established a goal of selling all zero emissions vehicles by 2035. And then subsequent to that, California passed their legislation, CARB adopted their new regulations, and New York formally announced their intent to follow those regulations. So that's the story that you probably saw in the news recently, that New York formally came out and announced that they will follow the CARB standard, and that will be the goal in 2035.
Yeah. And do you guys ready for it? I mean, it sounds like you're all on board, dealers included.
Yeah, look, I think the dealers are certainly working toward that goal. We want to be a part of the solution as it relates to the selling of zero emissions vehicles. Our dealers are investing. They are preparing themselves. They're buying equipment. They're training their salespeople. They're doing all the things that I think any dealer would be expected to do. Pretty early in the process, though, I would say. The thing about this, I think that's really challenging, is trying to prepare yourself and invest today, and then figuring out when is the market going to actually curve up to where there's a lot more, first of all, available vehicles in the market, and secondly, when are consumers going to be ready to embrace the transition as well?
That's right. Dealers, it seems like dealers are they're under, it's almost like they're under attack, from one sector or another, whether it be the state asking them to sell EVs by 2035, or they've got a shortage of vehicles to sell, which is very, very difficult, or they're threatened by some of the direct to consumer sales processes or sales models that are out there. And I know in New York you've got them as well. Talk to us about that. Are your members concerned about companies that are able to sell their products directly to consumers?
So in New York, we have a situation here where we've allowed that to a very limited degree. Back around 2010, Tesla came to the market.
Right.
They were given 5 sales licenses. We felt that they were improperly granted those licenses. Some legal proceedings took place. We ultimately agreed, made a sort of an agreement between us and Tesla and the regulators that they would be given those licenses. And that's where it remains today, 8 years later, not because Tesla hasn't tried to expand the number of licenses that they're seeking, but we have successfully, I think, explained to legislators that particular business model doesn't serve consumers well, and it doesn't serve the communities of New York. And so we have been able to keep any further advancement of that model for the last 8 years. And it'll be back again on the legislative agenda next year, and we'll be prepared to do what we've done in the past.
Yeah,
we also obviously have concerns about some of the legacy manufacturers and the direction that they're looking to go with some of their initiatives as well. And so we have it going on both ends. You have the Teslas, Rivians, and Lucens of the world, and then you have the legacy manufacturers kicking it around, trying to figure out a way how they might try to capitalize on that as well.
That's right. We see Ford kind of sticking their toe in that water in terms of making the dealers live up to 5 different elements in order to sell EVs, and one of them is obviously to be able to order that vehicle online, have it delivered right to the consumer's front door under a one-price structure. So there are things out there that it seems as though they're moving towards more of a Tesla-like approach. Of course, the Volvo side and with VW, with their new launch of Scout, we don't know where that stands right now. whether that's going to be a dealer network or not. But so there are some things out there, aren't there? That
there are, Jim, and I find it interesting. When we're in the environment we're in today, and we have been now for the last 2 years, and just that whole scenario we're in, it sort of opens the door to a lot of different ideas about how cars should be sold going forward. It gives people a chance to step back and sort of reevaluate how the industry maybe should work in their view. So here's the scenario that I would suggest. If you're a manufacturer and you think that your business model can be based upon an order method of buying and selling vehicles, so you're not going to put inventory out there to any great extent out into the market, and you're going to rely on consumers coming into the franchise dealers that represent your brand, and you're going to ask them to order a car.
Yeah.
Assuming that we're beyond this point of where we are in being constrained with vehicle production and supply and so forth, let's assume that every other manufacturer out there, or the large number of them, they're unrestrained by that, and they go ahead and start reproducing cars and putting them back out there in the inventory into the market.
Right.
Kind of back where we were before.
Yeah.
So now I've got this customer who's looking at a particular vehicle. I can't get it today, but I have to order it. But I can go across the street and I can look at 2 or 3 other brands that have a very competitive model for the one I'm looking at, but they've got it sitting there right there today. I can take delivery of that car today. In my mind, the one that has the vehicle there is going to win that sale 8 or 9 out of 10 times.
That's right. That's right.
I cannot imagine a situation where a consumer, unless under very extraordinary circumstances, would choose to wait 4 to 6 weeks as opposed to the option of taking delivery of the car today. That's just me. I've been doing this 40 years.
And I don't think it's just you. I think there's a lot of
very impulsive buyers.
Sure. I don't think that's just you. I think there's a lot of people in the industry that are listening to us have this conversation that are shaking their heads in agreement with you, that say, yeah, we've been in we know American consumers and we know what they want. They want, once they make that decision, they want it yesterday, not even today. So that's why spot deliveries became so famous in the industry many years ago, a few decades ago, and because when they want it, man, they want it. They don't just want it tomorrow or the next day or a few days ago. They want to drive home in that vehicle, and I would agree with you that inventory rules. That being said, what do you think, or maybe some of your members have shared this with you, but what do you think that sweet spot is? The number of days in inventory of cars that OEMs are sending to lots and to dealerships lots. Because I think if there's anything that we've learned through COVID in the last 2 years is that we don't need a 4-month supply of vehicles out there where it's a race to the bottom, in terms of price, and every dealer's fighting, their colleagues for that deal. What's your take on that?
Yeah, Jim, I'm going to step back and I'm going to talk about when you're a manufacturer, if you can produce a vehicle, a model of a vehicle that's attractive to consumers, that can hold its value from a pricing standpoint, you're not going to need to incentivize the sale of that vehicle.
Right.
If you go back and you look at the history of the industry, when a car was put or a vehicle was put out in the market that was met the consumer's needs and it was popular, it was well designed, well equipped, the car sold.
That's right.
It's only the circumstances where a manufacturer produces or overproduces a particular model of a vehicle and it's not selling.
That's right.
And consumers are not embracing it. That's when we get ourselves in the situation of having to put incentive money on the hood of the car. It becomes very expensive.
That's right.
To a manufacturer to sell those types of vehicles. So I think we've tried to learn this lesson a number of times in the past. I think manufacturers have gotten really good at being better about, but when you're producing vehicles, when you don't have a buyer, right now today for the vehicle, you're trying to anticipate, what consumers want. And if you're really good at that, like some manufacturers have been, you're not going to have a problem, with excessive inventories.
Right.
And I think some of the circumstances that drove it in the past aren't there anymore in terms of the labor issues and so forth that go along with the producing of the vehicles too.
Right.
So,
right.
I think there is an opportunity to reset the market a little bit, and I think there's an opportunity to get a lot better about how vehicles are produced and put out there. But I absolutely believe that in order to sell cars and be successful and get market share and do the things that a lot of manufacturers want to do, you have to have vehicles in the market.
That's right. That's right. What do your Ford stores feel about Ford's new move to say, hey, you got to make an investment, you got to agree with these 5 pillars of this program in order to sell EVs moving forward? Is there a consensus out there among your Ford stores?
I think that they largely agree that they need to invest in the future. They agree that there is some amount of equipment and training and even charging stations that they will need to install. What they're struggling with, and I think this is where a lot of the frustration and the friction is, it's the timing of it.
Yeah.
It's the timing of being asked to invest hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars today, when Ford Motor Company can't tell you when their production levels are going to be at a point when they're going to be able to create a reasonable return on the investment of a dealer today.
Right. Right.
And we don't know when the consumer demand is going to also turn up from a embracing EV standpoint. We don't know when that's going to happen either. We know when the government wants it to happen. We know when the manufacturers want it to happen, but we don't know when that's going to happen. We know it's going to be at least 3, 4, 5 years down the road,
right,
or more, before that happens. And so I think the frustration is being asked to invest a lot of money today and not really seeing a return on that for a while.
Sure. What are the greatest challenges, do you believe, that are facing your members there in Rochester today?
I think right now the hardest part about where we are today is you're in the transition mode. Where we've been now for the last 100 years, we've been selling internal combustion engines, and there was never a question about that was going to be the type of vehicle that we sold. It was just a matter of the makes and the models and all those types of things. 10 or 15 years down the road, pretty strong indication that we're going to be selling zero emissions vehicles. I say that because I don't know they'll necessarily be EVs, because there's other technologies out there that I think are going to play a role in our industry. So we're in this window of transition, and I think this is what's tough for a dealer. How much do you invest in the new technology? How much do you try to hold on to the old technology? What kind of training do you do? What kind of equipment do you buy? How do you market yourself? I mean, there's just a lot of things that have to happen in this transition, and dealers are making those decisions every day. And I think they're tough decisions, but they'll get through it because they're entrepreneurial type people.
Sure.
And they'll find a way to get through it. But I think that's what's challenging.
Okay. And then on the association side, what are some of the things that you want to get done before the year's out?
Well, from our standpoint, look, we're a regional association. We work with a little over 100 dealers in a 10-county area. We're trying to get our dealers properly equipped. We actually in our area have not had an auto show in the last couple of years.
Okay.
We're looking to change that in 2023.
Okay.
And we're also going to put a very strong emphasis on the EV world. We think an auto show is just a perfect place to introduce consumers to EVs and help educate them and show them what that world is all about. And we're going through a lot of transition. We happen to be in a market that's gone through a fair amount of consolidation of dealers in the last few years. So we're working through that. All those things, as their world changes, our world changes.
Right.
And so we're making sure we can roll with that, and just trying to be a great resource to our members. That's our goal, day in and day out.
That's right. And now is at a time right now in the industry that your members more than ever really need to be engaged with your association, right? And I've said this to other association presidents, but the number one complaint that I'll usually hear from association presidents, usually offline, is the fact that we don't see enough engagement from the members. They're kind of like, well, the association handles that. But at the end of the day, you really need the muscle of all of those members of your association to play a role and to get active with their congressmen and senators in the state, right? To say, hey, we're in this thing together. Don't leave it up to the association president and his or her staff, right?
Yeah, look, I wish every dealer was completely engaged in the advocacy and the political issues that we deal with on the state and the federal level.
Sure.
We're fairly fortunate. We have a number of dealers. Our board, which is made up of 15 of our members, is a very engaged group.
That's great.
And we've had a few what I'll call fire drills in the last year or two, where we've had to really get the engagement of all of our members. And I would say the vast majority of them have stepped up when we've needed them to. In my experience especially with the advocacy part of it, you have a group of dealers that are very engaged in it, and they've chosen to come forward and,
Sure.
and play that role. And you have a group of dealers that oftentimes just kind of say, hey, someone else is going to take care of that for us. Fortunately, we've had somebody willing to do that. But as I sit here and talk to you, do I wish every dealer was very actively engaged? Sure we do, because we have some important issues on the table here, direct selling and some of these other initiatives with legacy manufacturers, and we need engagement. And hopefully we're going to get it. We've had it in the past, and I think we'll have it going forward.
Yep. Well, Brad McAreavy, president of the Rochester Automobile Dealers Association, fighting the good fight for dealers right there in Rochester, New York. Thank you so much for joining us on CBT News. I know that our viewers and subscribers will get a lot out of your visit with me here today, so thanks so much.
It's been my pleasure, Jim. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.